And at this time, we're going to move right on to our next inductee. And to induct this individual, we have Purdy Curdy, Kurt Adonis.
Thank you, everyone. Tonight, I am here to induct a very special person. A friend, a colleague, and to steal a cliche, a true stand-up kind of guy. When I think of Dave Dwinell, the first thing that comes to my mind is professionalism. Everyone in this room could probably tell a horror story of a match gone wrong due to the incompetence of a referee. Dave Dwinell certainly does not fall into that category. Dave has been in the business for over 30 years. Considering I'm 32, that's quite a long time. He's been in the ring with the likes of Bruno Sammartino, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and of course, the greatest of all times, Kurt Adonis. Dave has reached the pinnacle of excellence in the wrestling business and had the opportunity to work at Madison Square Garden, the mecca of all sports, more than anybody in this building, well, present company excluded. Now, one of the biggest myths in wrestling is that anybody could be a referee. Sure, anybody could buy a striped shirt and a pair of pants, but to be a real referee, like our honoree, it takes years to develop your craft. I've had the honor of working with Dave for the past 12 years, primarily for Michael O'Brien's Northeast Wrestling. Each time I saw Dave's name listed next to my match, I knew the last thing I had to worry about was the referee screwing up. Me screwing up, that's a whole different story, but we'll talk about that another time. In 2005, I had a really bad accident in a match. Dave was able to get me through it, and what was supposed to be the biggest night of my life was actually saved because of Dave and his professionalism. Dave was never in it for the glory or the accolades. He never made attention to himself or took away from the match. He was there to count the shoulders, enforce the rules, and to help out any way he could. A rare talent today, if you ask me. He has done so from the AWA, the NWA, ECW, WWE, both at Madison Square Garden and on Monday Night Raw, and of course, where I know him best, Northeast Wrestling. The stories Dave has from his 30 years are the most compelling I've ever heard. When we have a legend on the shows, it's always great to see Dave interact with the legends and tell the stories. I recall a few ditties from a recent show with Sergeant Slaughter before our match that we had, and it's been such a long time since I laughed that hard. Dave has an amazing personality and he knows exactly where to let it shine, and that was in the locker room. He's got some great stories about Classy Freddie Blassie, but I'm sure we'll hear a few of those later on in the night. Dave is a true professional and a man who absolutely loves this sport, and of course his family. Normally traveling with his lovely wife Val, he knows what his priorities in life are. If any of you ever want to meet Val, just look for the woman in the stands who's sitting there reading a book. I know I'm running long, but I could sit here and talk about Dave all night. Dave has always worked under the credo that it takes 3 to make a match. And when dealing with a professional like Dave, truer words have never been spoken. It is my honor and extreme pleasure to introduce the newest inductee into the New England Wrestling Hall of Fame, the most professional referee I've ever known. He is my mentor, a professional, and most importantly, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Dwinell.
Thank you, Kurt. You read it just like I wrote it. That was no. That was a joke. I'd like to thank Kurt for those kind words, and I'd just like to give him a compliment. It's rare today that you see a wrestler. Kurt's retired now due to back injuries, but it's rare that you see a wrestler who works so hard and unselfishly to make his opponent look good. It's a lost art, but that's Kurt Adonis, and I'm very honored that he was the one to induct me. I want to thank Joe Bruin so very much, and his and his whole crew here for making me part of the class of 2011. New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, very important to me. I've lived in New York for almost 40 years, but I grew up 30 miles from here in a small town called Millbury, Massachusetts, where back in the 50s, that's the 1950s, not the 18, I'm not that old, I would wrestle with my brother Gary, who's here tonight on the front lawn, and we would take on, TV had just come out, and we would take on a persona of all the wonderful characters we saw on television. I saw my first match at the Worcester Auditorium. So I have great ties to New England. Well, 20 years later, I found myself in New York, and I said, you know, I'm not going to be able to become a wrestler, but I love it. Maybe I could be a referee. But I couldn't find a WWF in a phone book. I said, I'll get an application. I was pretty naive in those days, probably still am. But I found Capital Wrestling Corporation. I called them 22 times, they never answered. Finally, on the 23rd time they answered. I'm kind of sorry they did, because I'm going to recreate that famous phone call right now. Hello, is this Capital Wrestling Corporation? Who wants to know? I said, my name is David Dwinell. I'd like to apply for a job of referee with your organization. We don't need any. He made Marlon Brando and The Godfather sound like a choir boy. I said, well, can I send you a copy of my resume? He goes, don't bother sending me any gifts. It ain't gonna do you any good. We ain't hiring you. Goodbye. Well, obviously I was a bit discouraged. But I found out to become a referee you have to be licensed. So I was working in the trade center at the time, and I dropped by the New York State Athletic Commission. I walked in, I said, I'd like to referee pro wrestling. They said, most people want to referee boxing. You sure you want to do wrestling? I said, absolutely. So they gave me a shot. Westchester County Center, 1980. Never talked to a wrestler in my life, never stepped foot in a ring in my life. There I am at the county center. Johnny Rods, 21-year-old Eddie Gilbert. I go, now what do I do? There were no wrestling schools in those days. Somehow I got through the match. I was so nervous, I said to Arnie Skolin, can I have the poster because I'm never going to work again? I guess I was wrong, because here we are, you know, 30 years later. The people on the dais tonight, I've had some of my greatest matches with them. Tito Santana, a consummate wrestler. Tag team, individual, WWF, WWE, independent, wonderful to work with. Chief Jay Strongbow, who was my father's favorite wrestler. Unfortunately, Dad never saw me wrestle. I had the honor of doing him against Big John Studd. Rick Martel, one of my 4 favorite matches of all times, when he wrestled Nick Bockwinkel. And what made it extra special, not just that you have 2 great champions, but Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was in Bockwinkel's corner. And I had a chance to work with the first WWF champion. Things I will never forget. And Samu, where's Samu? I'm mentioning a forgettable match with Samu. It's a tag team match with the Rockers. I was down for the count. You got drop kicked and landed on my back. The man is big. And what was worse, we had to do the same match 2 more nights. And I only got 3 good ribs left. And every time on the second night I went down, I go 1, 2, and people on the front row were going, I think that ref's nuts. But I love him dearly. I love him, I love Alpha. And where's Howard Finkel? Howard. My second greatest moment in wrestling was celebrated with Howard. Madison Square Garden. I stepped through the ropes. And I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm a Red Sox, Patriots, all of those, but the Garden is the Garden. I looked up at the ceiling with the flags, 24,000 people. Howard goes, welcome to Madison Square. 24,000 people screaming, the lights are down on us. I'll never forget it. Oh, we have a future diva here tonight, by the way, my granddaughter, Angelica. Say hello, Angelica. A few weeks ago, a reporter said to me, how'd you survive 30 years in the business? The answer's simple. For 30 years, I've realized no one has ever paid to see me. These are the stars. My job is to make them look good. If I can do that, then I've done my job. I've also never forgotten what Bruno Sammartino told me at dinner one night. He had done a color commentary on a match. He said, Dave, just remember one thing. whether there's 10 people, or 100 people, or 10,000 people, you always give it your best because they're spending their hard-earned money to see you, and you have a duty and responsibility to each and every fan. In conclusion, I'd just like to say there are 3 people I'd really like to thank. Mike O'Brien, for continuing to use me as his senior referee, AARP approved. My wife Valerie, who goes to the shows, sits there way up in the back of the bleachers with a book, a little tablecloth, and some food, and people go, "You don't look like you belong here." She goes, "Oh, I'm married to the older referee. Somebody has to be here. If he gets hurt, they got to take him to hospital. I guess I have to." Very nice. It's always a pleasure. Last but not least, thank you to you, the fans. Because let's face it, without you, we're nothing. You buy the tickets, you buy the merchandise, you support us. You're always there to make it all worthwhile. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. God bless you all.